This is a Fox News alert. FBI Director James Comey has been fired by the President of the United States. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Comey's departure came unexpectedly, and for a moment you could almost hear official Washington pause, wondering which talking points to use. And then the barking began. Several Democratic senators have already and predictably called the firing Nixonian, as if you were watching something from during Watergate, but you are not. This firing was overdue, and everyone in Washington knows it. Comey recently went to Boston College and said this about his plans to run the FBI. Watch.
Boston College is a leader in thinking and educating on these incredibly important issues. So this is a great place to have it. Hope you'll do it many more times. You're stuck with me for about another 6.5 years, and so I'd love to be invited back again.
Not true as it turned out. Comey repeatedly injected himself into political matters that the country's chief investigative figure should stay out of. In 2015, for example, he came out against police body cams right after President Obama endorsed them, effectively undermining the president. At the height of the last presidential campaign, of course, he held that famous press conference about the investigation of Hillary Clinton, even though he was simply announcing that the FBI lacked enough evidence to support a criminal case against her.
Although the Department of Justice makes final decisions on matters like this, we are expressing to Justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case. I know there will be intense public debate in the wake of this recommendation, as there was throughout the investigation. What I can assure the American people is that this investigation was done honestly, competently, and independently.
This spring, Comey revealed that the FBI was conducting an investigation into alleged coordination between the presidential campaign of Donald Trump and the state of Russia. In exactly the same hearing, he refused to say if the FBI was investigating illegal anti-Trump leaks in the federal government.
Can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified information. But I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it. And I'm sorry I have to draw that line. I just think that's the right way to be.
Just a few days ago, meanwhile, Comey impugned Hillary Clinton aide Huma Abedin, dramatically exaggerating the number of emails she'd forwarded to her laptop and that of her husband, Anthony Weiner.
She forwarded hundreds and thousands of emails, some of which contain classified information.
Now, at times, both Republicans and Democrats in Washington seemed to appreciate the help that Comey gave them. But over time, his behavior was turning the Bureau, the FBI, into a key political player, and that's the one thing it is not supposed to be. By the end, it just got strange. Often in the course of a single conversation, you'd hear Democrats praise Comey for not indicting Hillary Clinton, then blame him for her defeat in November, and then turn around again and laud him for his Russia investigation in the hopes that he'd be able to bring down the president. Rarely has there been less principle on display in Washington. That's not all Jim Comey's fault, but he definitely didn't help. What this firing ought to remind us is that ultimately real power in a democracy resides with the voters. When unaccountable forces, whether they're at the CIA or Planned Parenthood or Exxon or the Department of Justice in this case, start making our biggest public policy decisions, we risk losing our democracy. Dictatorship by the unelected, that is the real threat to this country and our traditions. Let's be honest. This firing of James Comey was overdue, and everybody in Washington knows that. Comey was unfit for the office he held. The new president should have canned him the afternoon of the inauguration, but he didn't. Comey was too eccentric to run the FBI and too powerful for any of us to breathe easily while he was there. Just how powerful was James Comey? Let's put it this way. He was feared in a way that no appointed bureaucrat should ever be feared in a free society. Time and again, elected lawmakers on both sides came on this show and expressed worry and concern about his behavior. But they did so only during commercial breaks with the cameras off. Why? Because they were terrified at the prospect of criticizing him in public. They certainly...
Newt Gingrich, Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to lay out the case here. James Comey, I think, earned this. I'd love your thoughts.
Well, look, I think the key fact is that the brand new Deputy Attorney General, who is a 30-year career professional in the Justice Department, who was President Barack Obama's U.S. Attorney for Maryland, who was just 2 weeks ago endorsed by the Senate 94-6. This is the person who wrote the letter, which is devastating, and said that it's clear that Comey cannot lead the FBI, that he has made such a significant series of mistakes that it has crippled the morale of the FBI. And in that letter, he goes through citing Attorney General after Attorney General after Attorney General, all of them saying what Comey's done violates totally the FBI. So you're President Trump, you have the Deputy Attorney General, who everybody agrees is a nonpartisan, widely approved career professional, sends a letter to the Attorney General and says, if we're going to rebuild the FBI, Comey has to go. The Attorney General says, all right, I agree with you. He puts a cover letter on. It shows up on President Trump's desk. What I would say to the Democrats is, if the President of the United States gets a letter like that from a career professional who you just voted for, how could he do anything else except the letter and fire the director of the FBI? Because you'd be looking at this career professional and deciding that he didn't know what he was talking about. And that's why I think the Democrats and the elite media tonight have this very, very difficult job of trying to convince the rest of us that somehow magically this Barack Obama U.S. attorney, 30-year professional, somehow was turned by the Trump team and is now an agent of Donald Trump. I don't believe that. I think what he did, and he has people should read the actual letter. He cites Attorney General after Attorney General from both parties, saying that this was exactly wrong and that Comey, in fact, violated the rules of the Justice Department, the principles of the FBI, and is not capable of rebuilding the FBI. Now, I think at that point, President Trump, frankly, had no choice.
Well, let me read from this letter, because I think this is very important, and it's not a case that the media is focusing in on. I cannot defend the director's handling of the conclusion of the investigation of Secretary Clinton's emails. He admitted, up until he said he's not doing anything, that she violated laws. And he goes on to say, and I do not understand his refusal to accept the nearly universal judgment that he was mistaken. Almost everyone agrees the director made serious mistakes. It is one of the few issues that unite people of diverse perspective, which we saw the comments of some of the left from when they didn't like what Comey was doing. And then it goes on to say, the director was wrong to usurp the Attorney General's authority, announce his conclusion that the case should be closed without prosecution. It is not the function of the director to make such an announcement. At most, the director should have, it goes on, completed the investigation, presented its findings to federal prosecutors. Now he defends his decision by asserting that he believed the Attorney General at the time was in conflict. But the FBI director is never empowered to supplant federal prosecutors and assume command of the Justice Department. There is a well-established process for other officials to step in when a conflict requires the recusal of the Attorney General. Wow. That is a powerful indictment against James Comey.
Look, and what everybody has to understand is that letter is not written by a Trump campaign person. It's not written particularly by a Trump supporter. It's written by a 30-year career professional, President Barack Obama's choice to be the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, and a man who the U.S. Senate voted 94-6 just 2 weeks ago, saying this is a man of great integrity. And when you read the letter, and of course it goes on at great length, when you read the letter, you realize that Comey, who, by the way, as you know, in the last 2 weeks, we've had Hillary Clinton on television saying that Comey was a major reason she lost. And it's kind of weird. You'd think the Democrats would be saying, yeah, I always thought what he did was wrong. Now they're saying, oh, no, you shouldn't get rid of him, even though they were all for getting rid of him. Hillary Clinton, I suspect, thinks he should have been gone. But this also fits another pattern. If Donald Trump walks out in the morning and says the American flag is red, white, and blue, a significant number of the elite media will say, no, it's fuchsia. Don't you understand that it's fuchsia? Because they're not going to accept Donald Trump saying anything. And in this case, Trump was the executor of the judgment of the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, who decisively said to him, you must fire Comey. And I think it's important to put in context what Trump is doing here. It's not about the campaign. It's not about Trump's personal view. It's the Commander-in-Chief, President of the United States, getting a document from his Attorney General that says we cannot rebuild the FBI as long as this guy's in charge.
Okay, we need to go through some facts and laws, and I go back to that July press conference when he did this 13-minute. I was sitting there with my mouth open thinking, oh my goodness, she is about to be indicted. It was that strong a case he was laying out. I'll never forget the moment. And then at the last minute, but never mind, that's kind of what it was. Let's look at, for example, the list of potential crimes here. And honestly, you know, disclosure of classified information. It happened, Mr. Speaker. That's a fact. You know, records management. He even said you cannot put on a private server top secret special access program information, unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents. Fact, it happened. They were talking about a mom and pop shop bathroom where the email server was kept. Concealment, removal, mutilation. I think that would count for 30,000 emails, sir. Statements of entries, generally. Is there anything here that we don't know is proven in terms of a violation of law? And why in my heart of hearts tonight, sir, believe that we have a two-tier justice system that if Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, had done the things that the Clintons did, you would be in jail tonight and I'd be visiting you with a cake and a file.
Well, I would hope that wouldn't be the case, but...
No, I'd do it for you. I'm a friend.
Thanks. I'd rather you'd reverse that and said if you were in jail, I'd bring you.
Oh, thanks a lot,
the cake and the file. That's neither here nor there.
Okay.
but here's the thing to think about. The next big test, and this will be a real test for the Democrats in the Senate, you're now going to have the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General reach out and look for somebody of such integrity that they can rebuild faith in and belief in the FBI. And I think if they send to, if the president nominates somebody who's clearly not a Republican, not a conservative, not a partisan, but a dedicated law enforcement person of considerable background, then I think that the test for the Democrats is, are you really going to politicize the Federal Bureau of Investigation, even when the guy you just endorsed who got 94 senators to vote for him and who's a career professional is the guy helping defend this and helping put it together? I think that's the next big test. Comey's now gone. He will become part of a lot of history books. But the turning the corner, getting a first-rate leader who can rebuild the morale and the integrity and the public trust in the FBI, that's the big test now for the Trump administration. You
know, you point out 90, I think it was 94-6 or 96-4. I lost my math.
94-6.
Okay. That this is an Obama appointee here that wrote this letter tonight. This is not a Trump appointee. You know, if you look at all the differing people that have served at the highest level as attorney generals, for example, and a deputy attorney generals, you know, look at Judge Lawrence Silverman served as the Deputy Attorney General under Ford. It's not the Bureau's responsibility to opine on whether a matter should be prosecuted, and he believes that the director's performance was so inappropriate that the FBI director and the Bureau will ever completely recover. That is a stinging indictment. Jamie Garlick, by the way, Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General under President Clinton, joined with Larry Thompson, Deputy Attorney General under President Bush, to opine that the director had chosen to personally restrike the balance between transparency and fairness from the department's traditions and concluded the director violated his obligation to preserve, protect, and defend the traditions of the Department of the FBI. One more second. Mike Mukasey, he said the same thing, and that disclosing the recommendation said it was out of fashion. Alberto Gonzales. And if you want to look at somebody I never thought would agree with us, Eric Holder, who served as the Deputy Attorney General under President Clinton and Attorney General under Obama, said that the director's decision was incorrect and that it violated long-standing Justice Department policies and traditions, and it ran counter to the guidance that I put in place 4 years ago, laying out the proper way to conduct investigations during an election season. And he concluded that the director, quote, broke with these fundamental principles and negatively affected public trust in both the Justice Department and the FBI. We're talking about a broad spectrum of political views here, but in the arena of law and the Department of Justice and the Justice Department. I'd like you to react to those very prominent, respected figures.
And, of course, all of this is captured in the letter by the Deputy Attorney General, who makes this unbelievably strong case that there is no defense for how Comey behaved, that it is a very dangerous violation. I mean, you can't have the nation's leading law enforcement agency, with its thousands and thousands of agents, with its capacity to get court-ordered wiretaps, with all the things they can do to gather information. You can't have the top of that behaving capriciously and deciding whether or not he or she will release things. That's why they serve under the Justice Department. They don't serve equal to it or above it. And this is really one of the more extraordinary, maybe the most extraordinary case in the history of the FBI. But again, notice, even though, as you just did, you can quote Eric Holder, the Attorney General under Obama and Deputy Attorney General under Clinton. You can quote Gorelick, who was the Deputy Attorney General under Clinton. The fact is the elite media is going to go crazy. They are going to totally distort this, and they're going to refuse to recognize and refuse to acknowledge that this was, in fact, the legitimate decision of the Deputy Attorney General, who was a career professional and was an Obama appointee as the U.S. Attorney. And by the way, the Wall Street Journal has a superb editorial which came out this evening, which lays out this case calmly and just says, look, for the good of the country, for the good of our system of justice, for the good of the Federal Bureau of Investigation as an institution, this was the right decision. The President reacted appropriately to the recommendation of his Attorney General and his Deputy Attorney General. We'd be in a lot more trouble if he got a letter that was that strong and didn't take any action. And I think we need to remember that. It took courage on President Trump's part to do this, but it would have been a disaster for the country if he had rejected this letter and not done it.
That's so well said. You know, on all of the issues that we talk about, I believe it is such a travesty of justice that we know Hillary broke laws that would put the rest of us in jail, sir. You know, that's not equal justice under the law. You're not allowed to do what she did with an email server, what she did with the Clinton Foundation, the quid pro quo. She signed off as Secretary of State. The foundation's taking in millions. 20% of our country's uranium goes to Vladimir Putin. And these investigations die. The Fourth Amendment protections we have, sir. And General Flynn is surveilled, okay, incidentally, but then he's unmasked, and then the intelligence is leaked to the press. And on top of that, on 3 separate occasions, the President, in his letter tonight, says that Comey said he's not under investigation. And he has allowed this to hang out there so that the entire country has been sold a bill of goods and a narrative and a lie and a false conspiracy by a media that from day one has wanted to delegitimize and destroy this president. It is beyond him contributing to a crisis in confidence and division in this country. Am I right or wrong here?
No, you're right. And you'll notice yesterday that the former Director of National Intelligence, Clapper, and the former acting Attorney General, who was inherited from Obama, both said in testimony that there is no evidence that Trump was in any way involved, period. And so, you know, you promptly have various news media people say, well, they may not have found a smoking gun. That's not what they said. They said there is no evidence. So people need to understand the elite media and the hard left are desperate to avoid the reality that Donald Trump won, that Hillary Clinton lost. They are desperate to find a way to undermine and delegitimize President Clinton. But in this case, and it's be really interesting to watch it play out over 3 or 4 or 5 days, as the average American comes to realize, this was the recommendation of President Obama's U.S. Attorney for Maryland. This is the recommendation of a career professional. And what the President did is he took the professional advice of somebody who has spent their lifetime serving the country. Not a Republican, not a partisan, not a campaign worker, but a genuine, deeply committed Justice Department employee. I think the country's going to conclude this is one further example of the elite media being dishonest and being, frankly, hysterical, and one more example of us trying to move to restore the rule of law and to restore integrity back to the government.
Mr. Speaker, I know you moved heaven and earth to be with us on this very important breaking news night. Thank you so much for being with us.
Very important day. Very important evening.
Very much sobering, actually.